I wanted to be able to tell people, to tell the hearing world, really, about what life is actually like, what being deaf is like, and that deaf is not just that I can't hear, but that there really is a life amongst deaf people. We actually have a life. Betty Gloria Miller. Yeah, I became interested in art really ever since I was small, simply because my father, he himself, Ralph Miller, he was a commercial artist. He actually worked as a commercial artist, and he's the only deaf individual among many, many deaf friends who all of his deaf friends worked in the printing industry. Dad did not. So I actually followed in my father's footsteps with the artwork, and he would teach me some of the skills of the trade and about art and the appreciation of art. So growing up, I've always had that appreciation for artwork and painting and so forth. Many people would react to that and they would see that work, my work, and they would react with a some shock, and they would even ask the question, "Am I angry? Are you angry?" And of course, here I am. I'm just simply bearing my soul, my artwork, and the painting. A lot of people uh, were taken aback by that, shocked. I mean, it's the truth, you know. If what's real, it's real in life, I guess. I guess there's some things that many people out there may not speak to or address, or they keep it in, but I'm very open. I'm very open about that period of time. There's a lot of deaf people who would identify, would come up to me and also identify with that. So that was powerful. Well, it seems like, it was controversial. That was really an awakening for me when I was a student at Penn State University. I really had wonderful teachers, two in particular that I would say great teachers. And they, for the very first time in my whole life, outside of Gallaudet University, I finally felt like I was on par. They treated me like a colleague. They treated me so well and supported me in my endeavors. It was really wonderful. You know, deaf learners, how do they learn and the process they go through in life? And so there are some specific, two deaf friends of mine in particular, Ann Silver and Harry Williams. So I really had an amazing experience in Spectrum and really how it influenced everyone around us. It was, it's where I learned to really appreciate dance. I really had never seen deaf dancers before, so I did not have that exposure and that experience. I was able to meet so many deaf artists, and it was really awe inspiring for me as an individual, even though We had a lot of things that would emerge in terms of conflicts, but really, in the whole grand scheme of things, I would just simply say, wow, we really are very brave as deaf people who would venture out and move away from their homes and all come together and start this whole process. It was really amazing. When I look back, all I can say is wow. And really, after that, I've not really seen any other organizations founded like that. Now, this painting is of a building there at Spectrum. It's the ranch. It's not where you live, but it's separate from where they live. But this is where we did all of our activities in this particular building. Now, you'll notice in a lot of my paintings, you'll notice this around uh, the chin, where many of us have to grow up having to learn how to speak. And so you can notice that in here. And here, this fella are very deaf, which means they're fluent and native, like with ASL. But still, having grown up in a deaf world, they had to learn how to speak. Oralism, the method of oralism of teaching us, it's really teaching us to imitate the hearing community and how they speak. And it's almost like we're puppets, just like a puppeteer would be with the moving of the mouth. It was really to tell the community about and the hearing world about what life is like, what really being deaf is like, and that being deaf is not just I can't hear, but rather there really is a life amongst the deaf community. So, again, I would paint, create works of art related to expressing my feelings about the world at large, the world that is around me. So I see a lot of deaf artists that they will do just your regular type of artwork, but very few actually related to their deaf experience. So again, growing up in a as a deaf person or a hard of hearing person, that experience should be included in these artworks. A lot of deaf artists are just drawing or creating whatever's out there, the normal, but it can be difficult for them to paint or create something from their experience, something that is real to them. It's internal. You'll notice you have the flag that's reversed. The stars are reversed on the other side, symbolizing oppression. Notice the sisterhood. I'm surprised that I wrote that. That was from spoken C to shiny spoken C. It's got the hands up. David Nelson, who is a graduate of RIT, NTID, really, he and I became very good friends. And, you know, I just saw, in this, This person can't hear all of the activity, all of the loud noises and the activity. This deaf individual is clueless to this. He's in his own world. He's quiet. When David Nelson saw this, he immediately purchased this piece of artwork. He could identify with this particular character. So, wow. And so, in this particular piece of work, it's symbolic, really, of back in the day, the oppression of ASL. That ASL is not a language and that it's just deaf gestures. That's what we were told back in the day. And of course, that all started to change. And then as ASL began to blossom and grow, and the acceptance was much greater, and they accepted sign language as a language in and of itself. So, yeah, that's that. So you can see the pictures, you can see the hands, the forbidding of sign language. The hands are kind of chopped down. And then you can see the progression as it ventures out to freedom. The hearing test. This is a typical experience based off of my personal experience, having to wear the headsets and say a few of the key words. Hot dog. That's a very common experience when going through a hearing evaluation. You would have to say hot dog. You'd also have to hear and listen to different words. And I remembered the one hot dog. That's the one that comes to mind. So this was based on my experience when I was raped. Obviously, this individual is muted. They can't speak. That's basically my brother. Don't tell. Obviously, you're trying to look in. You feel shame. There's shame in this. So that really had an effect on my life. And because of that, I mean, this has actually happened to many individuals that are out there. They could certainly relate to this because they've been through this experience. I hope that here individuals this could actually help other deaf artists actually look at this work and say, I can do the exact same thing. That's what I hope for.